We can't put God in a box. We need each other's eyes to see Jesus. To look at the face of a newborn baby is to look at the face of God. Empire desires ultimately controlling. We're also acting like a cult. The justice of Jesus is radically inclusive. Truth that requires violence is no truth. I would say what bothers me the most, undoubtedly, is a lack of curiosity. Sometimes we just need to sit down and be humble.
Buckle up. This is What the Hell Do I Know with JB.
Father Joash Thomas. Joash Thomas. I'm going to introduce you a little bit to my audience so they know who you are. I'll give you a little read in here. It says, my guest today is Father Joash Thomas. He's a priest, speaker, theologian, and author of The Justice of Jesus. His work challenges Christians to think deeply about faith, justice, and what it really means to follow Jesus in today's world. Joash brings a fascinating perspective shaped by his roots in India, his experience in public policy, and his commitment to help people see the gospel through fresh eyes. Father Joash, welcome to the show. So thankful to have you.
Thanks, Brother Jason, and thankful for your work as well.
Oh, that means so much coming from you because you are such a pillar. I found your work online, and obviously I reached out to you right away as I just started diving into it because I really wanted to bring you on. There's so many things what you're doing, of course, through the Instagram, but this book, The Justice of Jesus, is really, it really kind of forces you to think and ask some questions maybe about the things that we've assumed. I grew up in the church here in America. I know you're in Toronto, but I grew up here in this church, the Western Church, nonetheless. I was in a very large Southern Baptist church as a child through really my adult life. And when I say large, there wasn't a term of mega churches back then, but we had a massive auditorium that had a massive balcony, and these Tiffany drums would be in the back, and these beautiful organs were all on the sides. And they had TVs everywhere. So it was a massive, massive deal. But it had a lot of impression on me that over the years, there were certainly great leaders in that church that I think cared for the faith and wanting me to understand faith. But there's a lot that I've had to like shed, from that. So in seeing your work, you really question a lot of, some of the things I've already been questioning, but your book that you've written and then the things you're placing online really causes a person like me, and I think probably other people in your audience, to stop for a second and think, are we thinking about this right?
Thank you. Yeah, that's very kind. What a gracious thing to say about my work. And I think so much of my work has been born from my own journey of wrestling. So I share a bit of my story in the book. I'm happy to get into some of it here as well. But, I have a very complex history, like all of us do as human beings.
Yes,
We're so complex, and God delights in that complexity and every bit of it. But I was born and raised in Mumbai, India. I spent the first 18 years of my life there. My family's been worshiping Jesus for 2,000 years now, thanks to the Apostle Thomas, who brought the good news of Jesus to my ancestors 1,500 years before the first Western missionaries showed up.
Wow.
And, we had ancient, indigenous, pre-colonial ways of understanding Jesus. They were quite creedal, held to the Nicene Creed. So it was quite orthodox that way, little O orthodox, but also big O orthodox. My ancestors were, Orthodox, Catholic, Anglican, and more recently evangelical for the last 5 generations, Pentecostal on my dad's side. I have had this journey of really journeying, first as an immigrant to the States at the age of
Uh,
18, where I worked in I joke about how I wanted to be American so bad that I worked in Georgia Republican politics as a political consultant and a lobbyist,
come on.
before Jesus saved me again, or maybe for the first time.
It's
So
great.
so I understand that world, brother. I
Yeah.
was a Southern Baptist church planting intern. I was
Wow.
discerning a call to the pastorate, and then over time realized that I'm actually called into the priesthood. And again, a desire. I moved to Canada 5 years ago. I've worked in international human rights for the last decade, and it's through that work of justice with the local and global church that I was able to explore more of my own identity, and just realizing that more of my ancestors for centuries longer have worshiped Jesus and ancient sacramental ways and not in modern evangelical ways. And so, my faith is so ecumenical. I both enjoy praying in tongues, like my recent ancestors, and praying the rosary, like my more ancient and medieval ancestors. And I think Jesus is everywhere in all these global church traditions.
I'm just jumping on here in this quick commercial soundbite to tell you, you have got to start subscribing to this show. If you like the content I'm putting out, which I promise you, I am doing the best to put out great content. And I know you're trusting me with your time when you're listening to this. And it means a lot. And if you feel like I need to listen a little bit more or do something different, I want your feedback. I love your comments. I love the DMs, but I need the subscriptions. And so it is an easy way to support the work that we're doing here at What the Hell Do I Know? Just go ahead and click that subscribe button now. I think that's so beautiful because that's what I feel like you're almost giving permission for people to experience Jesus in how they need to experience him. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but when I read some of the things you write and again in your book or even online, in the social media world, I see this world that you're saying, and I've seen you say this before, this rosary and then the tongues, and that there's beauty in all this, and you don't have to understand it, but if you're
Yeah.
drawn to it, that's okay. Because so many times it's like this is the one way. I said this
Mhm.
on with another guest one time, and I don't know if I got it from another guest, but it was like there's 45,000 different denominations of Christians and each one of them feel like they have it the right way? No. There we go. We're back.
Sorry, my window's being a little windy, so I was just adjusting so it wouldn't
Oh,
bleed in.
okay. It went blank. That's okay. Hey, we'll cut that out if we have to,
I'm
but
back.
honestly, I'm all good. But no, there's 45. What I was saying is that I can't remember
Yeah.
where if I said this to guest, but I think I got it from another guest or read it, but
Yeah.
there's I think it's 45,000 different Christian
Yes.
denominations worldwide.
Yes.
And by the way, not all of them, from my understanding, feel this way, but some among them, like the Apostle Paul would have said, some among them definitely feel like they have it right. And
Mm.
this is the list A through Z that we need to follow, and some of them have go into double A and double Z, right? But these are the things that we need to do, or these are the things we need to stay away from, and this is how God is. Right? And I just love how you're approaching it in a totally different way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if there's anything that my near Pentecostal ancestors have taught me, it's that we can't put God in a box. Um, and we see that all throughout the scriptures as well, right? With the early church, especially the way, the early church tries to contain Jesus to just the Jewish community and then are convicted by the Spirit through others like Paul and Peter that, hey, we're really like, we as a church struggle to keep up with the Spirit. The Spirit's always out there doing new things in the world and healing the world and healing the divisions of this world. And the church is historically from the early church days, we've just struggled to keep up with the Spirit, and that's human nature, that wrestling. But there's hope at the same time. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think It's a very colonial posture, even to look for
Mm.
all truth in one place. So we try to look for all truth in one church, one denomination, one religion. And look, I'm a Christian priest, right? So, I mean, I have my preferences. I'm a creedal Christian. I hold to the creeds. I believe things about God. I believe God looks like Jesus. Um, and at the same time, I also know that Jesus is in all of his creation, as scripture teaches us. Romans 1, Romans 8, Colossians 3 says, Christ is all and in all. And we try to take that Christ and put him in a box. And when we do that, I think we miss out on being captivated by the beauty of Christ in all of creation and all of the world. One last thing I'll say on this is
You can keep talking, by the way. I love listening.
talk about this forever. But yeah, so I guess a couple of things, since you've given me permission then to keep
Yes, for
talking.
sure.
The first thing I'd say is, so I'm at St. Stephen's University. I teach there on faculty and lead fundraising there as well. And one of the things that we do at St. Stephen's University is we're curious about how Jesus has revealed himself in other religions, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, right? So I'm teaching a class on interfaith peacemaking this fall, and I'll be bringing in a Muslim imam friend of mine from the Toronto area to be a guest lecturer in my class. And I'm going to ask him questions about, hey, we know that Jesus is a big part of the Islamic tradition. I've got friends who are Jesus followers from the Muslim tradition, and they say that they were introduced to Jesus in Islam from a young age because they're taught about Jesus. Now they're not taught that Jesus is divine like we are as Christians, but they're still taught beautiful things about Jesus. So I want to learn through their eyes what Jesus looks like, and see, because there's stuff that I don't know, and like I say in my book, The Justice of Jesus, we need each other's eyes to see Jesus. So that's one part of it.
So beautiful.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is this is why I've really appreciated learning from ancient, indigenous, pre-colonial Christians, both like my St. Thomas Indian Christian ancestors in the East, but also Celtic Christian ancestors in the West. Now, if you're a white person in the States, you've probably been lied to by the American empire that you're just American. None of these other identities matter, right? But the reality is all of us come from somewhere. And, if your ancestors were Celtic, Scottish or British or Irish, there's a good chance that they were Celtic Christians before the Roman Empire showed up. And Celtic Christians would say that there's a big book and a little book. The big book is creation because it's infinite in understanding possibilities of understanding Jesus. The little book is scripture. Now, not to say that the little book isn't important. It is important, but it's quite limited at the end of the day in what it can reveal to us about Jesus. But Jesus has already revealed himself in creation. So there was a unique connection with the land and creation, not to worship it, but to have the eyes to learn about Jesus from it. And I think this applies to other religions, societies, and cultures as well.
By now, you may have heard me talk about my friends at floors.com. That's FLOORZZ. Make sure you go check them out, floors.com. They have all your flooring needs for remodel, new build, great designers in-house. Give them a call. Tell them JB sent you. It'll mean the world to me, but I know it'll mean the world to them. I am so proud to know my friends at True North Pest Control, and I want you to know them too. They're a family-owned business that cares. I love working with family-owned businesses. Traditionally, family-owned businesses live, work, and play in the communities that they're involved in, and True North does just that. They're a growing company, and I would encourage you, if you need pest control service of any kind, termites, bugs, annual sprays, quarterly spray, whatever it is, mosquitoes, they can take care of you. They are your pest control heroes. So give them a call. They're all over Central Florida, here where I live in the Emerald Coast, and the entire state of Georgia. Check them out. That's truenorthpest.com. True North Pest Control. Thanks so much. Tell them JB sent you. Oh, that's so beautiful. And I've often thought, and I've heard it said, and I felt it in my heart when you stand at the edge of the ocean, the world, and you look out on the ocean, or if you get into some of these places and you think, and look at what God's done. I mean, I can remember when my son was born, my oldest son back in 2004, which, makes me really, really old, it feels like. But my son was born in 2004, and I can remember my first child. And I can remember being in that operating room, or the delivery room, I should say, and holding him for the first time, and the whole process of creation. And I get chills just thinking about just I don't know that I've ever felt the presence of God more in that
Mm.
moment of just holding my child and just realizing, like, the being in awe, just being in awe. Yeah.
Wow. I gotta share something with you. And I don't know if you've seen me write this or share this before.
Mhm.
I'm writing a Substack series right now on Augustine versus Celtic Christianity.
By the way,
And
I gotta get on Substack. I mean, I've got so many friends and guests that are coming on that are on Substack, so I've gotta get into the Substack thing, so yeah.
yes, yes, no, definitely. I mean, if you're in Substack or your listeners are in Substack, I'm at Masala Chai Theology. You can find me there. But um one of the things that has been astounding to me that really connects with what you've just shared here, Jason, is um, there was this Celtic Christian named Pelagius who I was taught in evangelical seminary in Dallas uh, to hate because Augustine hated him. Because Augustine was all about original sin. Human beings were full of crap. We're
Uh-huh.
born evil. Kind of stuff like that. But Celtic Christians like Pelagius would say to look at the face of a newborn baby is to look at the face of God.
Oh,
And
wow.
And that's basically what you just told me without even knowing that there's some ancient Celtic Christians saying this, right? But
Yeah.
they strongly believe that to look at the face of a newborn baby is to look at the face of God because that image of God is so fresh in that child from the moment of their birth. Now, this kind of theology terrified Augustine, and it probably terrifies some of our listeners because we've
Mhm.
been taught to not think that way about creation and humanity. But some of us may ask questions then like, well, why do we need Jesus then? And that's what Augustine asked. Why do we need Jesus if a newborn baby,
Is the creation
looks
of
like
God, yeah.
God, right?
Right.
But the reality is also that, as Pelagius and other Celtic Christians said, um, there's sin in the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
And the sin that the Bible speaks the most to, with over 2,000 verses, is greed, economic exploitation, injustice. And those sins corrupt that pure and perfect image of God in a child as they grow up. Um, and this is why we need Jesus, to point us to that light of God that's already within us, not from the moment we pray the sinner's prayer, but from the moment of our birth, the moment of our creation, that inherent goodness of God in us, to point us to that light, point us back to that light of God in us, and to teach us how to walk in the light with God, with Jesus, as He is in the light.
That's so beautiful. The thing I think about when you're talking, and this is just, my small-minded thought here, but Paul, I know, gets into Rome, and he's teaching all these people, and he looks at all the statues around it, and he says, "This is the unknown God. You've been worshiping. That's Jesus, the unknown God you didn't know about. You've already known him. He was written on your heart."
Yes.
And, I thought that's very interesting the way that, these Celtic Christians would have thought as you've positioned it. W w I feel like you've answered it in what you've said, but I kinda want the listeners to hear because I have heard I see this in my feed from my feed's filled really weird. If you were to look at my feed, it's all over the place because
That's great.
I have friends of mine that are still involved into the church, and I see their stuff, and then I have friends that have deconstructed, and I see their stuff, and I have friends that I say deconstruct because that word's very broad. I have friends that have deconstructed to the point where they do not practice. I would argue they practice their faith because they're extremely kind people. They just have given up on the church, and Jesus to an extent, which I understand, I get, and they're on their journey and working that out. They're toiling out their faith. Uh, but there's some like me even that have deconstructed, but I'm going to cling to Jesus. I'm holding on to him, right? So I have these different thoughts, but this idea of original sin continues to pop up on my feed. And the pushback I see, and because I grew up, and it's something I'm not a because I don't know, I'm still like I grew up in that world where that's what I heard is original sin. You're born sinful, and therefore you needed, the scriptures that would talk about that we were made right with God because while we were still yet sinners, Christ died for us so that we can be made friends of God. I still think that's true.
Yeah, yeah.
However however, I think that would be pointed back to this original sin idea, that babies steal, whatever. How would you say it to the audience of that difference from original sin and where you've landed?
Yeah, yeah. So I think an overreaction to what I've just said, which was Augustine's reaction,
Mhm.
um, was well, you're saying that sin doesn't exist. You're saying that we don't need grace, that we don't need Jesus. No, what I'm saying is more nuanced than that, right? Like what ancient Celtic Christians like Pelagius were saying is that you need Jesus. You need grace, and grace is made available to Jesus. I mean, these were Christians. Pelagius was a Celtic Christian monk. He had very ascetic ways of looking um, at Jesus and God. So you need Jesus, but you don't have to trash humanity to say that you need Jesus. You don't have to trash the image of God, the beautiful, good image of God in a human being to say that you need Jesus. We can acknowledge. I think both sides can agree that we're created in the image of God, um, but we can also agree that there's sin in this world, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't think
Yeah.
anyone would necessarily disagree with that. Like, look around the world, look at all the chaos and the divisions, turmoil, war, violence. There's sin in this world, those are the sins that the Bible speaks to. We have taken 6 verses on um, sin that we perceive to be about homosexual people.
Mm.
And we have distracted ourselves so much with those 6 verses that have been completely taken out of context. Um, and we ignore the 2,000 plus verses in the Bible that talk about the sin of injustice, right?
Yeah,
And that's the
yeah.
sin that's repeatedly brought up all throughout the Bible because that breaks the heart of God. And so, I think what you're getting at here is that there's an empire way of looking at
Mhm.
Christianity that wants to keep Christianity distracted from looking at the big picture things like why are there people who are poor? Why do we have a trillionaire right now when 22 American families are going to lose, sorry, 22 million American families are going to lose food benefits,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right now. So,
yeah.
there's like, they don't want us asking these questions that the Bible asks more. And so they keep us distracted on these
Mhm.
tangents other things and Augustine very much was, I think, empire's first apologist in the church. So up until Augustine, the church was nonviolent to the point that they were pacifistic. They would refuse to serve in the military, and Augustine was the first Christian to change the tide there and say, no, we have a Christian empire of our own now. We have a Christian emperor. He's our guy. Let's serve in the military, you know?
Yeah.
And he would play this uh, abusive power game also of getting the Roman Empire to persecute his theological opponents. I mean, think of that, right? That's like a
Yeah.
Catholic persecuting the Southern Baptists with state
Right.
power, or vice versa. And that's what Augustine did. He was the first one to do that.
Yeah.
So we have to read history in context and understand that there's so much complexity here from the people who create doctrines like original sin. And so to answer your question, I think empire desires ultimately controlling people and controlling the spirit of God, putting God
Right.
in a box, like we talked about,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
saying things like, you know, you can only find grace through the church. We don't want people running about, you know, in ways we can't control. And so that's where you have the doctrine of original sin being helpful to the
Makes sense.
church
Yeah.
to keep people in line. And I say this as a priest in the church
Yeah. Yeah.
all these years later. Yeah.
Well, and I find too that freedom in the church doesn't cause people to say, "I don't want to go to church." I mean, it actually draws people in. There is a large roar, and it's happened in the past. I saw it when I always say I was a default pastor, but it was in downtown Atlanta in Little Five Points, and I wasn't
Okay.
supposed to be
I know
there.
Little Five. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know Little Five area, and so if you know Seven
Yeah.
Stages Theater right beside Variety Playhouse, that's where we met.
Uh-huh. No way.
And it was run by the LGBTQ plus community, and so they're very graceful, and I love the community and being a part of it, but I really long ago left that, sort of hate the sinner, love the person, hate the sin sort of thing. I let that go long ago. Especially when you start doing life with people and you realize who they are and how much you love them and how much God loves them, and you're looking through a lens of Jesus and how to borrow a word from my friend Zach Lambert, the lens of Jesus, the
Yes.
Jesus lens. So, yeah, it's very interesting. When I was, there in Little Five and seeing that original sin and holding on to people, um, I don't know, that was a tough topic for me to get through, because I did. That's what I learned is that I was born a sinner. So it's
Mm,
very interesting other way to look at it, you know?
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, any therapist, so I've been in addiction recovery for a while now, and any addictions therapist will tell you that if you're gonna overcome your addiction, you need to be kind to yourself. You need to be compassionate to yourself. You need to understand the trauma that your body carries, um, and it's only in being kind and gracious to yourself that you can reform. You know, I was in India a couple of weeks ago, and I got to connect with a friend who took me to Mother Teresa House. Um, and
Oh,
he knew Mother Teresa. He would call her grandmother in his childhood. And he would tell me, you know, Mother Teresa to me embodied God and Jesus because anytime I'd be mischievous at school, my parents would threaten to send me to grandmother, Mother Teresa.
yeah,
And you know, anytime I met with her, she wouldn't say any harsh things to me. She would just transform me with the love that she had for me. She would just ask me questions in love. "Hey, kid, why are you doing this? Why are you hurting yourself? Why are you hurting?" I mean, it was so compassionate that it would change me. So we were terrified of that love, is what he told me. Uh,
it's so beautiful.
right, but that's God, right? And
Yeah.
that's the way God looks at us and treats us, and that's the love, the abundant, unconditional love of God that Jesus has made known to us, that the institutional church has unfortunately done away with, and you know, not let us be kind and compassionate to ourselves. When and really, in reality, that's what we need for transformation in ourselves and in the world.
I feel like I'm constantly deconstructing some of the concepts, even, over a decade later, just still working through what you knew. And I thought that's interesting, of course, the famous words of Jesus saying, all the commandments can be wrapped up, all the laws can be wrapped up in love, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and love others. But it's as yourself. And I was thinking that as yourself part when you were saying that, to forgive yourself and to go through those things and to work through them and to try to give grace to you personally allows you so much better to love so much more free, um, in that. I wanted to, go back a little bit into what you were saying and how you find Jesus in other things, and you're looking at other religions and looking how I remember Shane Claiborne writing in a book probably in 2012 or so about a Muslim story of a man that worshiped Jesus so much that they ended up crucifying him. They said that you don't you love this guy so much and you're kind of not worshiping Muhammad or whatever. And so the village and the town, and I don't know how many, years ago, so I don't know where that story Zach, I can't remember where that came from or which book that was in, but I thought that was very interesting that so and his I think his question that was posed in that book was like to the two Christians that would hold to a truth of acceptance of Jesus and a sinner's prayer sort of thing is, where did that guy go?
Wow.
Right? Right?
Wow.
So I thought it was very interesting.
It truly is, right? And yeah, again, it's all about how we try to put God in a box and try
Mhm.
to predict the way God works. But where in the Bible do you see God being predictable in how God works? Where in the
Right.
Bible do you see Jesus being predictable? He was all over the place doing, wherever the Spirit led, basically. And where
You've heard it said, yeah, you've heard it said, I say.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, he was subverting the norms and it was all toward love, toward people on the margins. Um, and I think, the church at its best is a peaceful, nonviolent resistance movement to the empires of our day and their ways.
Mm.
Church at our worst, as we see in Augustine, is a tool for empire that divides and conquer, and that rules by dividing and conquering, but the gospel of Christ unites to heal, and that's the invitation. Um, so yeah, going to your point about you know um, Muslim followers of Jesus, I've got a dear friend who I'll also be bringing to my class as a lecturer. I've shared about him in some of my sermons. He grew up in an Indian Muslim family, moved to Canada, started serving in a church's local food bank, and was transformed by the experience and wanted to follow Jesus because he saw Jesus followers worshiping Jesus by doing justice. And he was like, I want to do this. But, in our communities and Eastern communities, community is everything. So you don't want to lose your family, your community, because of your spiritual choices. If you can keep both, you want to aspire to that. So this friend of mine, he then goes to the local imam in town, the imam who I'll be having guest lecture that I know through this friend. And he asked this imam, hey, I feel like I need to pursue Jesus. Islam has taught me about Jesus, um, but I don't want to stop being a Muslim. I'm seeing both as interconnected. I'm
Mm.
seeing I'm a follower of Jesus, but I don't
Yeah.
want to abandon my Muslim community and the beauty of the Muslim religion that I've been taught. So I want to do both. And so he started meeting regularly with this imam and this pastor who was discipling him at the church running the food bank. And then I meet this guy at a book event in town, and we're in the same town. So he's like, "Hey, I'm getting baptized next week," and I know nothing about what to expect from a story, but I show up, I hear the story, and then he introduces the imam who's at his baptism. The imam
Wow.
to his baptism to just bless this person and walk with him in his new spiritual journey, both as a Jesus follower who wasn't turning back, moving away from Islam. And now that story makes a lot of Western Christians, a lot of Eastern Christians too, really uncomfortable because we don't have the imagination for following Jesus while holding to your childhood's Islamic tradition, the best parts of it. But I, as a priest, look to this friend of mine. His name is Adam, and I keep telling him, Adam, you're teaching me so much about Jesus through your walk. So keep teaching me, and why don't you also come teach my class and expand our imaginations a little bit? Because
Yeah.
you're pioneering some new terrain here as a Jesus follower, as an apologetic Jesus follower, and he's seeing Jesus in Islam more and more through his own journey, and he's pointing the church to it. So yeah, there are stories like this of Christians all over the world, not just in
Yeah.
Islam, but also Buddhism, Hinduism, and other spiritualities.
What a beautiful story of a brother of ours in Christ, Father Joash. I really appreciate you sharing that because that is such a beautiful, beautiful story. Other things that I thought were interesting because you also got this growing up in the youth. Again, I grew up in Georgia. And I'm only saying that because it seems like it's a familiarization for you, seeing as that you were there as well. And so, but I can remember it was, don't let anything corrupt your mind that's unpure, and point to these scriptures, which uh, generally, I think that's good, but I also there was a lot of music that was not allowed for me to listen to growing up, which again, there's certain stuff probably was okay with. I get it. I'm a young, impressionable mind, so I'm not trying to be too harsh here. However, I do think that we get in a world where sometimes we get these faith songs, and some of them can honestly be beautiful. There are some songs that are written that, especially some of the older hymns, I still love to hear. And then when you understand how they were written and and why the person wrote them, can be even more beautiful. Modern songs I tend to struggle with, although I'm not saying that there aren't some beautiful lyrics to some Christian songs. But I've seen you post how you find Jesus in Drake, and you find Jesus
Oh,
in
Kendrick Lamar, very different. Let's be clear.
Drake's Canadian.
Very good Canadian. I know. Still a
Sorry,
Kendrick
you
Lamar.
said
No,
you
no.
said Kendrick Lamar, right? That's so funny, that's
That was
so
a
funny.
test. That was a test.
No,
Yeah.
no, I understand, that's so funny, that's so funny. But, that was a good one, actually. I forgot about their beef there for a second. But, you
Yeah.
find beauty in some of these great lines that you hear, and I think that's interesting. What does that look like for someone in our faith to again? Because when we say creation, we say God's creation a lot of times, and I again, super true. I'm looking outside a window right now. I live at the beach, and I'm seeing the ocean. I'm seeing the water right now. And it's that's God's creation. So, but artists creating songs is part of God's creation too, right? How does that look?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's just so much wisdom and truth in art, in music from all over the world, right? And I think it is going to require us to be courageous. Um, so I've appreciated folks like Lecrae, who,
Mm, mm,
has brought his full black self and has taken the white church to the black church, and also to Kendrick Lamar, and
yeah,
that type of music, right?
yeah,
And has been a bridge in many ways. But I've heard interviews of like the top Christian rappers we love from the black community, even, who say, "Yeah, from my inspiration, like, yes, I'm missionally bringing this music to the church, but I need to go and listen to Kendrick Lamar and Drake and, all the OGs, Jay-Z, like all the
yeah,
OGs there, for the inspiration then to bring the church there, right? And so they're already doing that missional work. I don't know if all of them would describe it as that, but they're teaching us how to see Jesus in another culture, in black culture, when the history of the states, white Christians have been taught to fear uh, black people and black culture and even black Christianity, liberation theology coming from the black church, right? But these are bridge builders who, have again, like, been so helpful in my journey of, rediscovering Jesus through the global church. So, so I think it's important for us to um, draw towards all of these things with discernment, of course, but also with courage, right? And I think it requires us to be secure in our own faith. And what I mean by that is um, so grounded and so secure in God's love for us that we know as we go into cultural engagement, cross cultural engagement, that there's nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Um, and that courage then drives us to, with curiosity, but also humility, to go and engage in these cultures, not from a posture of you're you're doing it wrong, because my way of understanding God is the only way of understanding God. That's what the Western missionaries did with my Christian ancestors who had been Christian longer
Right.
than they had, from Thomas, who came from Jesus. But that's a colonial posture that I talk about in my book as well.
Yes.
But what does it look like for us to go humbly as Jesus came down to earth humbly, as we see in Philippians chapter 2, where he empties himself, makes himself nothing, a poor, oppressed human being under the Roman Empire. What does it look like for us to humble ourselves so much and go as curious learners? And just ask questions instead of making judgments or assumptions. And I think when we have that posture, we will see Jesus everywhere in his creation. And um, and it's going to blow our minds. It's going to expand our faith. It's going to make us love Jesus more and feel more and more secure in Jesus. And again, I'm saying all these things as a priest. I love the church. Yes, God is revealed to us through Jesus in the church. I serve the sacraments for that reason, right? But I'd be lying if I said that Scripture doesn't say that Jesus is everywhere in His creation, including other cultures like the ones worshiping the unknown God. What does it look like for us to go curiously there, and that includes with things like music. I'll also say this: when we control people by telling them uh, there's no Jesus to be found in all these places, we're not just lying, we're also acting like a cult. This is what
Mm,
cults do, right? They control, high
right,
control,
right,
by convincing
right.
people that there's no good and beauty anywhere else, and telling people how to think. And I think that encourages a very lazy, um, prideful, colonialistic Christianity, and not the Christianity that looks like Jesus.
But yeah, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful, and there's such freedom in that. I mean, I can remember we used to play songs in our church, like "Under the Bridge Downtown" from Red Hot Chili Peppers, and there's some lines in there of searching, of just not knowing what's going on, and pain and heartache, and there's some beauty in that song that can certainly be used, that doesn't have to be, uh it's not not considered sacred or unholy. I mean, there's definitely things that can be used in that sense. You do talk about colonialism,
Yeah.
and this is a topic that for, an older white male like myself, heterosexual white male like myself, that's grown up in the Western world and, capitalism and all of these sorts of things are I mean, I think I learned to eat, like, at the same time I learned to, make a dollar, you know what I mean? And so how did like, what and we have this posture of, like, go and make disciples, and
Mm,
then when you bore that together with the business mindset and this capitalistic sort of mindset, the church has exploded in, like, we need to go and make disciples. I have a
mm,
friend that, had a ministry down in Nicaragua, and he would take kids. He still does it. He still does it. He takes kids that, very poor country and very poor area that they when the parents can't take care of them, do anything, they leave them at essentially they call it the dump. It's not like a garbage center like that we have here in America, but it's a dumping ground, and it's a children's dumping ground. And he takes them in and has somewhat of an orphanage and has learned to help them figure out how to make a way for themselves. And he takes them to this beautiful work, amazing work. And I love what he does. But he told me that every plane ride when he comes home and, it helps to figure out how to get funding and all the things that he needs. But every ride home and every plane ride back is full of, American high schoolers that are coming down or whatever on these mission trips, which God bless. I love that they're leaning into missions and leaning into their faith. But he said part of what he sees is that nothing ever changes in Nicaragua because if they want a building built or they want a church done, these guys come in and do 10 days what they would take them, months to toil with. And instead of learning things, they just sit back and say, hey, we got another missionary trip coming in next month, so we'll get a new store, we'll get a new building, or get a new church, or we'll get a new whatever. And so I guess in a roundabout way is what is colonialism? Because I feel like we're hitting on that. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, what is that looking like? What do you mean by that? And how has it maybe harmed us? And break that down for the audience.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a great question to be wrestling with. So, when a global South Christian like myself, or an indigenous Christian from North America or Australia talks about colonialism, we're not talking about a political buzzword or an academic theory, although unfortunately it's often reduced to that by people in the West. When we talk about colonialism as the global church, um, we're talking about our lived experience. We're talking about our history. We're talking about historical events that actually happened, undeniably, um, to the global South, that were perpetuated by Western empires who were backed by Western church denominations. Um, and this is everything from the Roman Catholic Church to the Anglican Church to Southern Baptists, all of them and everyone in between participated in this colonial project and enriched itself from colonialism. In my book, I share a story of how the Church of England has recently done historical research into their archives, and they've admitted that they have profited off of the wealth of the slave trade. They invested in slave ships, which back then were good things to invest in, right? But what are the ethical ramifications of that as Christians? They didn't, they were happy to look the other way. And they made millions of dollars, billions of dollars through it, and are now setting up a fund to help communities from places where people were enslaved from or to,
Mm,
and invest millions of dollars in those communities. And I think that's the Zacchaeus thing to do.
mm,
Zacchaeus encounters Jesus, and Jesus doesn't tell Zacchaeus what to do. He he's convicted by the Spirit, and he comes up with, I need to do this to make things right for people that I've wronged, for people that I've exploited in my community, or outside my community. I'm going to repay them 4 times what I stole from them, right? And again, Jesus does is invite himself to Zacchaeus' home and bless him with his presence, but he's so transformed by that encounter with Jesus that he does these things on his own, right? And I think that needs to be the posture of the Western Church in even examining our history. So all our denominations in the West, almost all of them, have profited off of colonialism, off of the extraction of wealth resources. If your church has property in the States, that was likely built on stolen
yeah,
land from our
right.
indigenous neighbors. That's colonialism, right? And
Yeah,
what do you do? I'm not the Holy Spirit. I can't tell, Christians what to do. I
right.
often get invited into spaces because of the book, where Christians are like, well-meaning folks, they're really wrestling with it. And they're like, what do we do, Joash? And I'm like, Well, I appreciate the trust and confidence, and I share ideas to spark imagination in the book, but I can't tell you what to do because you have to do that work with the Holy Spirit of discerning. And you don't have to get it all right. It's just about trying that posture because God smiles on us when we even try. God knows we're not going to get everything right. And perfectionism is also a result of colonialism and capitalism that has crept into the church, right? But God doesn't call us to be perfect. Yes, like there's that verse, be perfect as I'm perfect, but it's still
Mhm.
like aspirational. It's not,
Yeah.
God doesn't
Yeah.
expect us to be
Right.
perfect.
Right.
He expects us to be faithful and to just, do our best. And God smiles on us when we even try in our imperfect human ways. So I think colonialism was a real thing that benefited the Western church, that hurt the global South church and the global South. And it still continues today. It's not a thing of the past. The reason why the American empire doesn't want us asking questions about colonialism is because we would then connect the dots with what's happening in the Middle East right now,
Right.
with kids being
Right.
bombed in Gaza,
Yeah.
with families being driven off of their ancestral lands in the West Bank. Because the reality is, we've all participated in and benefited from colonialism, including myself. I became a beneficiary of colonialism the day I moved to America and then to Canada. And so, we try to neatly categorize people as oppressed and oppressors, but and that is true. There are oppressed and oppressors, but those categories are fluid. They're flexible. They change over time, and God always stands on the side of whoever is oppressed right now. So we better find ourselves there too.
That's, yeah, no, I appreciate you opening our minds to that sort of thing, and I love the part you said about, the posture and the trying, the understanding, the leaning into it, that trying to figure out how can we do better. I think, made and again, another, I guess, colleague who's, passed from this earth, but, of Shane's would be, Tony Campolo, who would say that, he was trying to do better than he was yesterday, right? Right? That he was like, "I'm trying to figure out how can I do better? How
Yes.
can I do better?" And there's days I feel like that. I look around and I'm definitely blessed, and my wife and I are constantly looking for places that we can invest in people versus invest in things. A part of the reason why the podcast, part of the reason why we're trying to find other charities, and we support a local one here that we really love, which is a children's advocacy center, where they step into these spaces where kids are abused by some of the closest people to them, and they walk with them and give them counseling, and they bring in they help them get justice here on earth too. They have the police, and they walk through all those things to make this hopefully, try to end some of these atrocities that happen to children that, well, our God, that we've talked about earlier, that that they're the face of God. Yeah,
Yes.
so, not I shouldn't have said the God, but the face of God.
Yes.
Um, that's
Yes.
so
The image
good.
of God in that child
Yeah,
is being
yeah,
restored through the justice work
that's
that you're
right,
doing.
that's
and
right.
and you're reconnecting them with the light of God that's already in them, that the world has robbed from them
Yeah,
through trauma. And just quickly going back to original
yes,
sin, I think it
yeah,
was Richard Rohr in his recent book, The Tears of Things, excellent book. Richard Rohr talks about original sin and says, what if original sin is just generational trauma that we have misdiagnosed as the church as
mm,
original? Because all of us have generational trauma from our
yeah,
ancestors, whether
yeah,
we bodies carry it. Science teaches us that, right? And so what if it's just that, but the early church had limited knowledge and understanding of that, so they characterized that as original sin. But most addictions, like it's in your DNA, it's in your blood,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
you're not a piece of crap. You're a
yeah,
beloved
yeah,
child of God's, but you also bear some sins and trauma from your ancestors, right? So anyway, I think that's also a helpful way to look at original sin. But yeah, I think that the invitation I have for us is um, to be courageous in expanding our imaginations of God, who is vast and limitless, and to not settle for any boxed presentation of God. Understand that Creator God, who makes complex humankind and complex creation, is also complex in the triune God self.
I say this all the time, but I picked it up from Paul, who said we see dimly now, right? We see dimly now. Um, I want to ask you a question about your book because it
Yeah,
is so good, and I said this earlier offline before we jumped on the recording, but you have some incredible critics, or not critics. I shouldn't have said that. Some incredible authors
yeah,
that have I don't know if
endorsed
it's
it.
called endorsed it, yeah, and forwarded. Yeah, thank you for the word. I'm coming on 50, so brain fog for me is really,
Okay,
really real. But,
okay,
you've got, I mean, like Shane Claiborne, Sarah Bessey, Beth Allison Barr, Danielle, Strickland, Kristen Cobes, Dumez. I mean, you've got some incredible, and they've all written great books. So I would tell people, I mean, if you've got summer reading lists and you want to dive into something and really challenge your thought of Jesus, first go grab The Justice of Jesus by Father Joash Thomas, because if you've listened to his voice and how much he loves Jesus and loves people, this is a trusted voice. But The Justice of Jesus is a great book here, and it's amazing that you had that some of these other authors have, and then go and look at these authors that have endorsed his book and grab their stuff and keep reading, right? So good. But I want to ask you, because when you say the justice of Jesus, that's gonna invoke some feelings from folks here in the U.S. I mean, this justice is a big thing, and you're either on one side or the other, so it can be divisive, some ways. I want justice for people that were harmed, or I want to make sure people go to death row. I mean, you've got a lot of words. When you say the justice of Jesus, what do you mean? And
yeah.
how is that different from what people often hear when they hear justice today?
That's so good. No, thanks for that question. And I was actually just in a podcast yesterday talking about my response to that, which is in the book. So I go to the parable of the Good Samaritan to point us to what the justice of Jesus looks like, right? And not to lead us through a full Bible study here, but just to maybe give us the big points here.
Well, I'm here
Um,
for it.
so, you know, I so the way I reframe the Good Samaritan for us a little bit is the way so many church fathers like Origen and Augustine and Ambrose and Irenaeus and others understood the Good Samaritan parable, which is Jesus is the Good Samaritan and the church is the inn. And just like the Good Samaritan tells the innkeeper, you take care of this oppressed person. I'm going to be back and I'm going to check in on you. That's what Jesus also does with the church. He'll hold us accountable when he returns and ask us, what did you do for the least of these? Because what you did for the least of these, you also did for me, right? And so that's how the early church understood the Good Samaritan. That's been lost so much in the post-colonial era. But in the Good Samaritan, we see a few different representations of the justice of Jesus. So my first point is the justice of Jesus is radically inclusive. Um, the Samaritan was the enemy of the Jewish people, right? And Jesus shares the story to a Jewish audience to like to provoke them.
Mhm.
That's like telling an evangelical, an
Right.
LGBTQ person is the good Samaritan. Right? He was like, whoa, a trans person is a good
Yeah.
Samaritan. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
that's too far, Jesus. But you know,
Good
but
point.
but the justice of Jesus is radically inclusive because the Good Samaritan shares space with the victim of violence. Like it comes very close and proximate to them. Proximity. Um, the next point I make is the justice of Jesus is holistic, um, which means it's not just short-sighted. It's not about instant gratification. Um, it's not just about sending high schoolers to do something good for a short instant moment, but it's also asking questions like, what does this do long term? Can we be holistic in that way? So the Good Samaritan doesn't just rescue this oppressed person, he also restores, applies bandages, and then there's also a long-term care component where takes the person to the end, right? And so that's holistic justice. The justice of Jesus is also expensive. It's costly, and it may even cost us everything, like it did John the
Mm,
Baptist, Jesus, the prophets, or MLK, or many others, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right? The justice of Jesus is expensive, and it will require something of us, just like it requires something of the Good Samaritan. It costed him 2 days' wages, costed him his donkey, his personal vehicle, costed him, the care he paid for, the oil and the wine he used to bandage the person. It will cost us something. That's the way of Jesus. And then finally, the justice of Jesus is nonviolent. And I say this in that section. I say in the book, truth requires no violence, and truth that requires violence is no truth. And just as truth that requires violence is no truth, justice that requires violence on the part of the church is also no justice. And so this touches on things like Christian nationalism,
yeah.
or I was in a persecuted church context a few months ago, and I heard some evangelical Christians with their narrow imaginations there wondering, should we arm ourselves like some of our other neighbors for
Yeah.
self-defense? But should we arm ourselves? Again, Jesus looks at Peter and says, "Put down your sword," right? And we as the church struggle with that because we want to control, we want to arm ourselves. But the justice of Jesus is nonviolent, and so I define the justice of Jesus in these ways, and I also say in the book that, look, I know that many of us have been taught by the Western Church to see the justice of Jesus as one thing, which is basically, we use the term biblical justice and we weaponize that to keep out people that empire teaches us to hate.
Yeah.
But the justice of Jesus is for everyone, just like Jesus is for everyone, and it looks in these different ways.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And yeah, when you get into the book, you obviously break down all of these really well. Um, so I kind of got one more topic I just want to
Yeah,
cover, and I think you touched on it a little bit, and
yeah.
we'll kind of close up with this. Um, what bothers you the most about the American church today?
Hmm. I mean, it's a loaded question.
Yeah, I
There's,
know.
you
That's
know,
why
there's
it's the final, the big one, right?
but I also love the way you framed it. You said the most, right? The
Hmm.
most. And I would say what bothers me the most, undoubtedly, is a lack of curiosity.
Mm,
It's this posture, again, this colonial posture. Willie James Jennings talks about the colonial posture of coming as a teacher instead of a humble learner, and then points to Jesus and says, of course, Jesus was the King of Kings and, the wisest teacher, but Jesus shows up as a humble learner. He shows up as a baby to his mother Mary and learns his prayers most likely from his mother at a young age, right? And so right, take that, Southern Baptist. You know,
you just dropping all kinds of beefs.
but but
Fair and fair and fair.
yeah. And we say this having friends who are still in that camp,
Sure,
right? The Southern
sure.
Baptist camp. But like but I think it's important for us to be curious and to quote one of my favorite all-time poets, Kendrick Lamar, sometimes we just need to sit down and be humble.
Mm, that's so good. I really love how you frame that. Um, Curiosity. I love, and I love that part about how you invite us and you're giving a voice to allow us to say, be curious, lean into it. You don't have to have all the answers. And you don't. By the way, if you think you
Never
do,
will.
you don't. You're wrong there. So that's so beautiful. Father Joash, this has been such an incredible conversation. I am so thankful to have you on to speak to, well, me, because that's just the selfish side of it, but really, hopefully, to our audience. And I love the fact that your book is speaking to so many of our brothers and sisters out there, and our LGBTQ plus friends and family there as well, and speaking into these marginalized groups that are giving them, I mean, a voice. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking up and being that.
Thanks, Jason. That's very kind. And I also want to say this, right? Like, I jokingly called a megachurch white evangelical pastor friend of mine in the States the other day a rich young ruler, because I think
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
us who have
Yeah.
privilege, including myself, um, are that rich young ruler.
Mm.
And and I think the reason why the rich young ruler rejects Jesus the first time is because, like the rich magi who travel a long distance to come see Jesus, rich young rulers like us, and like especially people who have privilege in any society, including Southern American society like yours, it just requires a lot more from us to journey and to travel,
Mm.
and it's hard because we have been conditioned to benefit from the status quo, the way things are. But I see in you someone who just embodies the humility of Jesus, who tries to steward what you have well. And I know that you also draw people like that who will then listen to you, and you'll speak to people like that who are on that journey. So, what an honor to walk alongside you and just bear witness to what God is doing in it through you.
Well, that's super kind, Father Josh. I am thankful for your words, and that's just too kind and too generous of you. But I am thankful for it. That encouragement means more than you'll ever know, and because you know as well as I know, when you there's a cost. There's a cost to stepping in, and as you get closer to Jesus, there's a cost. And that cost can be relationships, and that cost can be these arrows of mental anguish from upsetting someone or somebody calling you a heretic or somebody calling you whatever else it is, and there's a cost.
Yeah.
Um, but I still can't you can't unsee what you see. You know, you can't unsee what you see. So I said that was our one last topic. But before we go, I wanna ask you
Of course.
a
Yeah.
really quick question.
I'm good. Yeah.
What charity would you wanna highlight while you have a chance to highlight here?
Well, that's very kind. Um, um, can I do 2? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yes,
2
yes,
quick ones.
yes,
Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
only because one of them is the one I work for, which is, it's set up as a charity in the States, and in Canada, so both US and Canadians can give to St. Stephen's University, where, we're doing so much of this, decolonizing and reconstruction work, right? So many of us just stop at deconstruction. We go deeper than that.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have a beautiful community of people just learning from each other and our diverse traditions, Christian traditions, or even outside Christianity. And we're learning the Jesus way of justice and peacemaking, and interfaith peacemaking as well. So, if what I've shared with you has resonated with you, has blessed you in any way. I'm part of a community of more weirdos and heretics like me. And so, and we would greatly appreciate any financial support you want to bless our students, our learning community with. Yeah, so that's St. Stephen's University, SSU.ca. And then the second organization I want to highlight is one I serve in a voluntary capacity with as an advisor, and that's the Bethlehem Institute of Peace and Justice, BIPJ.org. They do incredible work. They're basically the Palestinian church that is that are teaching us so much about Jesus right now under the rubble. They're the persecuted church, the oppressed church, who are teaching us, who are sharing their theology and wisdom with us. And SSU has a partnership with them. You can take classes at SSU and study with Palestinian Christian leaders at BIPJ. But Bethlehem Institute Peace and Justice, they have conferences, they have forums where they're basically doing a lot of educational work in the American church, because we've been taught to view all Palestinians and the Palestinian church as the enemy. And they're doing a lot of peacemaking and reconciling work there. So that would be the second charity that I'd point folks towards. More boots in the ground justice, in addition to education at SSU. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I know that sort of justice is so important to you, and I wanted to highlight it's important to me as I find different places that I can pour into. I love to give, and I will continue to steal this from the Southern Baptist Church, but I love to give locally, regionally, and globally. So I will
Beautiful.
just steal it from
Yeah.
them.
Biblical. Yeah.
And I think it
Jerusalem,
still feels
Judea,
good. I
Samaria.
think it
Yeah.
still feels
Yeah.
good to give that way. But brother, I am so thankful for you, and I'm thankful for your friendship. I know this won't be our last time speaking. And then to my audience, hey, until next time.